All right, let's dive into something pretty heavy this time.
Yeah.
Murder within families.
Uh-oh.
It's we're going to explore some of the dynamics and motivations and look at some real-life cases that shook Australia.
It's really disturbing and fascinating at the same time.
Yeah,
It's kind of one of those things you don't want to look at, but you can't look away.
right. And it really forces us to confront a truth that I think a lot of people would like to avoid, which is that violence can occur even within those bonds
Yeah,
that are supposed to be the strongest.
absolutely. And it can be right under our noses.
Yeah, and to kind of guide us through this deep dive today, we've got some really powerful sources.
Yes.
We're going to be looking at hard data from the U.S. Justice Department on family homicides.
Okay.
Then we're going to shift gears a little bit and head over to Australia
Right?
and explore a truly chilling case known as the family murders.
Yeah, the family murders is one of those cases that's captivating because it's not just one event. It's
Right.
a series of killings. Yet that happened over time, and there's a lot of mystery surrounding it.
Yeah.
And it just raises so many questions
Mhm.
about the darkness that can fester beneath the surface of what appears to be ordinary.
Of just everyday life.
Yeah,
Yeah.
ordinary communities.
All right, so let's jump right into it.
Okay,
We're going to start with these U.S. Justice Department statistics,
okay,
and I think this is a number that might surprise some listeners.
all right.
16% of all murders in the U.S. involve family members.
Wow.
16%.
That's a significant number.
It's a huge number.
Yeah.
And, it's not just a number. It translates to thousands of lives lost each year
Right.
within their own homes.
It really is a stark reminder that the family unit can be a source of conflict
Yeah.
and violence.
Absolutely. And when we dig deeper into the breakdown of these murders,
Yeah.
some unsettling patterns emerge.
Okay.
Spouses killing each other.
Right.
Unfortunately, is the most common scenario.
Yeah.
But then you also have parents killing their children, children killing parents,
Wow.
and even siblings turning against each other.
Really?
It's
It's a lot.
it's heavy stuff, and it's important to note that women are disproportionately victims in family homicides.
Really?
That's actually something I wanted to ask you about.
Sure.
So while women make up a small percentage of victims in murders involving strangers,
Right.
the percentage jumps way up
Yeah.
when it comes to family.
Okay.
Why do you think that is?
That's a complex question. I think there's a lot of things that go into it.
Sure.
But we can start by saying that there's often an interplay of psychological and social factors
Okay.
that are at play in most situations.
So mental health issues,
Yes, mental health issues.
substance abuse,
Substance abuse, definitely.
financial stress.
Oh, yeah, financial stress. All these things play a role.
Right. Those make sense, but are there sort of deeper dynamics at play?
Oh, absolutely.
Maybe power imbalances within the family.
Power and control dynamics often underpin these cases.
Okay.
You think about, control and manipulation and a sense of ownership that one person might feel over another.
Yeah.
In some cases, the violence escalates over time.
Oh, so it's not just like a one-off thing. It can be years of...
Exactly. It can start as emotional abuse
Oh, wow.
or intimidation.
And then it just builds from there.
And then it reaches this tragic breaking point.
It's almost like a pressure cooker,
Yeah.
building and building and building.
Yeah,
And then
exactly.
eventually something's got to give.
And it's a tragic reminder that violence can take many forms,
Yeah.
and it often festers
Yeah.
within the confines of a home.
Okay. So with that understanding of the kind of broader context, let's shift our focus
Right.
to a specific case that's chilling in its complexity.
All right.
The family murders in
Yeah.
Australia.
Now, this case,
Yeah.
this is where things get really dark.
Okay.
We're not talking about an isolated incident, but a string of murders
Okay.
that terrified Adelaide back in the 70s and 80s.
So decades ago,
Yeah.
this is a cold case.
This is a cold case.
What was it about these crimes?
These crimes involved young men
Okay.
who were targeted, abducted,
Uh-huh.
and murdered.
These were kids.
Many of them were just teenagers.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And the way that they were carried out,
Yeah,
it wasn't just about ending a life.
right.
There was a brutality.
There was a brutality, a level of sadism.
Yeah, I don't even know the word for it.
Right.
But it went far beyond just killing.
It suggests that there was a desire to inflict pain
Right.
and maybe even derive pleasure from it.
So these were not crimes of passion. It was
No.
something much more
Calculated.
calculated and dark.
Yes.
It's tough to even talk about.
Yeah.
But I think it's important for our listeners to understand the nature
Right.
of what we're dealing with here.
Absolutely.
Some victims were found dissected.
Oh, wow.
Their bodies were cut into pieces.
Yeah, and there's evidence of drug use
Oh, really?
that was probably used to incapacitate the victims
Before
before the worst of it.
the worst of it.
Right.
And investigators believe that these killings were the work of a loosely connected group of individuals.
Yes.
They came to be known as the family.
The family.
So who was the family?
Yeah, that's a good question.
What do we know about them?
That's the million-dollar question, literally.
Oh, really?
There's a million-dollar reward
Wow.
for information leading to the arrest and conviction of those responsible for these unsolved murders.
So they're still looking.
Yeah,
That's how much this case has stuck with people.
absolutely.
Wow. Okay, so fill us in on the victims then.
Well, it all started with 16-year-old Alan Barnes.
16.
16 years old, last seen hitchhiking.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
That's so sad.
His body was found dumped in a reservoir.
Oh, God.
And he had been severely mutilated.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, and there was evidence that he had been drugged with a sedative called Noctec.
Noctec.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So it didn't stop there.
No, just 2 months later, 25-year-old Neil Muir disappeared.
Okay.
His remains were found and dismembered and scattered in the Port River.
Scattered.
Yeah.
Oh, God.
And like Barnes, there was evidence that he had been drugged with Noctec
Okay.
and had suffered a similar horrific injury.
Wow, so there's a pattern already.
Yeah, definitely a pattern.
Okay, so who else?
In 1981, 14-year-old Peter Stogneff went missing.
14.
14.
Oh, my goodness.
His skeletal remains were found a year later, also dismembered.
God, and they were just left.
Yeah, and sadly, a lot of the evidence in his case was lost.
Really?
Because the farmer who found his remains accidentally burned them
What?
while clearing his property.
Oh, my God, that's awful.
I know, it's terrible.
And yet another young life gone.
Yes, and then in 1982, another young man, 18-year-old Mark Langley, was found murdered.
Okay.
His body was also mutilated, and this time there were signs that a surgical instrument might have been
A
used.
surgical instrument?
Yeah,
That's chilling.
it really is.
It implies a certain level of, like,
Detachment?
and also just knowledge.
Yes, and the drug Mandrax was found in his system.
Anthrax.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm not familiar.
That was a popular drug in the disco scene at the time.
So this was like a party drug.
Yeah.
Okay.
It raises questions about whether Langley was deliberately targeted within that social scene.
Oh, wow, so many questions.
Right.
It feels like every detail just deepens the mystery.
It does.
And there was a particularly high-profile case.
Yes.
Right.
There was one that really captured the public's attention.
Okay.
That was the murder of 15-year-old Richard Kelvin in 1983.
15.
15.
And what was it about his case that made it so high-profile?
Richard was the son of a well-known TV news presenter.
Oh, wow.
So his abduction and murder set shockwaves through Adelaide.
This case feels different somehow. Warren.
Calculated.
Calculate. Yeah, tell me more about what happened to Richard.
Well, Richard's case is really heart-wrenching.
Yeah.
He endured weeks of captivity.
Weeks? Oh, my
Weeks.
God.
Oh, my. Before his body was finally discovered.
This is awful.
And like the others, he was found to have died from massive blood loss
Oh, my God.
caused by a brutal injury.
So, similar.
Similar, yeah.
So at least for Richard's family, there was some justice.
There was,
Right.
yes. Devin Spencer von Idem was sentenced to life in prison
Okay.
for Richard Kilvin's murder.
Wow.
The evidence against him was compelling. Hair fibers and witnesses placed him near where Richard was last seen.
So that's one conviction,
One conviction.
but multiple murders.
Right.
What happened with the other cases?
Well, that's where things get even more frustrating.
Okay.
Von Idem has always maintained his innocence.
Okay.
And while there were strong suspicions of his involvement in other murders, charges were ultimately dropped
Oh, really?
due to legal technicalities.
So even with a conviction, we're still left with so many
Response.
unanswered questions.
Right.
Yeah, it's like we're looking at a partially finished puzzle,
Exactly.
and the missing pieces are crucial.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and it's those missing pieces that have fueled decades of speculation and investigation.
Absolutely.
Who else was involved?
Right.
What was the extent of this network?
Yeah.
This so-called family.
The family, yeah. Who are they?
Let's delve into that.
Okay.
We know that there are other key suspects, right?
Yes.
Tell us about them.
Okay, so these weren't just random figures.
Okay.
We're talking about prominent individuals in Adelaide society.
Oh, wow.
A businessman, a former male prostitute,
Okay.
and a doctor.
A doctor.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And their identities haven't been publicly revealed,
Oh, really?
which just adds another layer of intrigue to this whole story.
Okay, so let's unpack this.
Okay.
We'll start with the businessman.
All right.
What made him a suspect?
Well, he was reportedly seen with von Einem
Okay.
the night Richard Kelvin disappeared.
Okay.
And there were rumors of financial ties between them,
Like what?
maybe investments or business ventures,
So a potential motive?
a potential motive or at least a connection.
Yeah.
that places him in proximity to von Einem during a critical time.
Yeah. Okay, what about the former male prostitute?
All right, so this guy was a known associate of von Einem.
Okay.
Witnesses place him at parties that von Einem hosted.
Okay.
These gatherings were said to be fueled by drugs and alcohol and attended by a mix of older men and younger boys.
So that's disturbing.
It is.
It paints a picture of a very specific social scene.
Yeah.
One that might have made these young men vulnerable.
Absolutely.
Okay, did this particular suspect
Yeah.
have any other connections?
Yes, he allegedly had knowledge of the Adelaide underworld
Okay.
and ties to individuals involved in illegal activities.
So organized crime.
Potentially.
Okay.
Some investigators believe that he could hold crucial information about the murders,
Wow.
possibly serving as a link between von Einem and other members of the family.
Okay, so we've got the businessman, potentially motivated by money or opportunity.
Right.
The former male prostitute, potentially embedded in a dangerous underworld network.
Yeah.
And then there's the doctor.
Mm-hmm.
This is where things get really unsettling for me.
Okay.
We talked about those signs of surgical precision
Yes.
on some of the victims' bodies.
Right.
That's what made the doctor a person of interest, right?
Exactly, because he had access to surgical tools, knowledge of anatomy,
Right.
and there were even rumors he might have supplied drugs to the group
Oh,
or
wow.
participated in the torture.
Hold on. This doctor was actually investigated,
Yes.
right?
He was tried for Neil Muris murder back in 1980,
Okay.
but he was acquitted.
Acquitted.
Yeah, due to lighter evidence.
Wow.
However, his name continues to be linked to the case.
Really?
Yeah, because the similarities between Muir's injuries and the doctor's medical expertise
Right.
are just too chilling to ignore.
So we have these three suspects,
3 suspects.
each with potential connections to von Einem
Right.
and this shadowy family.
Right.
With all this circumstantial evidence, why haven't there been more charges?
Well, it's a puzzle, isn't it?
It is.
Time plays a factor, of course. Witnesses' memories fade.
Right.
Evidence deteriorates.
Yeah.
And alibis get harder to disprove.
Right. And proving a conspiracy is incredibly difficult.
Yes, it is.
Just because individuals knew each other or moved in the same circles doesn't automatically link them to specific crime.
You need that hard evidence. You need a smoking gun.
Right. And then there's the issue of fear.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
These were powerful figures in Adelaide.
Powerful people.
Witnesses might be reluctant to come forward
Yeah,
even
go out
now,
there.
fearing retribution.
Yes, that's right.
Wow, so there have been some renewed efforts to crack this case.
Yes.
Tell me about those.
Okay, so in 2008, authorities launched a major cold case review.
Okay.
They even offered a $1 million reward
Wow.
for information leading to a conviction.
$1 million.
Yeah.
Wow.
DNA samples were collected from the key suspects,
Okay.
hoping for a match to crime scene evidence.
Any luck?
Unfortunately, no conclusive matches were found.
Oh, wow.
The investigation hit another wall.
It's almost like this case is designed to resist resolution,
It really is.
but I guess that's what keeps it so fascinating
Right.
and so compelling.
We can't help but try to piece together the puzzle, even if it seems impossible.
Yeah, it's a case that speaks to our deepest fears and anxieties.
It does.
The idea that evil can lurk in plain sight, hidden behind masks of respectability.
It makes you question who you can trust.
It really does, yeah. And it makes me wonder about the families of the victims,
Oh, yeah.
how they cope with the fact that these murders remain unsolved.
Yeah,
The lack of answers, the inability to truly hold those responsible accountable.
right.
It must be incredibly difficult.
You can only imagine the pain and frustration.
Yeah,
Not only did they lose loved ones in such horrific ways,
yeah.
but they've been denied the closure that comes with justice being served.
It's a wound that never truly heals.
It doesn't.
And I can see how this case, even after all these years,
Yeah.
continues to cast a shadow over Adelaide.
Yep.
A reminder of a darkness that has never been fully dispelled.
It makes you wonder if there are lessons to be learned from all this.
Yeah, are there things that we can do as a society
Right.
to prevent tragedies like this from happening
To
again?
protect the vulnerable.
Yeah.
To shine a light into those dark corners.
These are big questions, ones that deserve their own deep dive.
They do.
But for now,
Yeah.
let's shift our focus back to the family
Okay.
and try to unpack some of the theories
Let's,
surrounding the group itself.
Let's try to understand the psychology,
Yeah.
the motivations, the dynamics that may have driven these individuals
Yeah.
to commit such horrific acts.
It's a good place to start, I think.
Maybe an understanding be why we can find some answers,
Yeah.
some solace even in the face of such darkness.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
All right, so let's dive into that.
Yeah, it really is.
Okay, so we've laid out the facts of the case, the victims, the suspects, the lingering questions. But I think there's another layer to this whole story.
Right.
One that speaks to our deeper human instincts.
Okay.
Why are we so captivated by
Yeah.
these unsolved mysteries, especially ones as dark and disturbing as the family murders.
It's a primal thing, you know? We're
Yeah.
drawn to the unknown, to the darkness that exists just beyond the edges of our understanding.
Yeah, like a car crash, you can't look away.
Exactly. And I think part of it is our innate need to make sense of the world,
Okay.
to find order in chaos.
Yeah.
And when a story is left unfinished, when justice isn't served,
Uh-huh.
it just gnaws at us.
Like a puzzle with missing pieces.
Exactly.
We can't help but try to fill in the gaps, create a narrative that makes sense.
Right, and with the family murders, you have this added element of transgression.
Okay.
These weren't just faceless criminals. These
Right.
were supposedly upstanding members of the community.
Pillars of society.
Exactly. It shatters our illusions of safety,
Right.
makes us question who we can trust.
It's that juxtaposition that I find so unsettling.
Yeah,
The businessman in his suit, the doctor with his healing hands.
right.
It's a stark reminder that evil can wear many masks.
Absolutely. And it forces us to confront the possibility that darkness might exist closer than we'd like to believe.
Oh yeah, for sure.
It could be lurking in our own neighborhoods, in the faces we pass on the street.
Right under our noses.
Exactly. A very uncomfortable thought.
Okay, so let's put on our analytical hats for a moment and try to understand the family itself.
Okay.
Was this a highly organized group
Right.
with rituals, a clear hierarchy,
Okay.
or something more opportunistic?
It's tough to say for certain without more concrete evidence, but from what we do know,
Uh-huh.
I tend to lean towards the latter.
Okay.
Remember, this was a different era. No internet,
Right.
no cell phones.
Yeah, things moved a lot slower back then.
Organizing something complex would have been challenging.
So maybe not a mastermind at the top
Right.
dictating every move,
Right.
but more of a loose network of individuals with shared
Dark interests.
dark interests, yeah.
Who found each other and fed off each other's, let's call it darkness.
Okay, so that's a plausible scenario.
I think so.
Von Einem, with his charisma and manipulative tendencies,
Right.
he might have been the catalyst, the one who drew others in.
Possibly.
But a rigidly structured organization with
No,
bylaws and secret handshakes.
I don't think so.
I'm not convinced either, but wouldn't that make the case even harder to solve?
Absolutely.
If there's no clear hierarchy,
Right.
no paper trail,
Those connections are essentially invisible.
think about it. Their communication might have been through whispers at a party,
Right.
shared glances, unspoken understandings.
That kind of evidence is almost impossible to uncover.
Yeah.
Even with the best forensic technology.
It's just gone.
It's gone.
Which leads us back to that enduring fascination.
Yeah.
We're drawn to the mystery precisely because it resists resolution.
Right.
It's like a puzzle box we can't quite open.
And maybe that's the point. Maybe
Right.
these unsolved mysteries force us to confront the limits of our understanding. Yeah.
To accept that some questions simply don't have easy answers.
But does that mean we should give up trying to find those answers?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
The pursuit of truth of justice is essential,
I agree.
but I think it's important to acknowledge the complexity, the ambiguity.
Right.
There might not be a neat and tiny resolution, a single smoking gun that solves everything.
So how do we move forward then?
Yeah.
How do we as a society grapple with the reality of these cases, these lingering shadows?
I think it starts with awareness.
Okay.
Recognizing that evil can take many forms, that it can hide in plain sight.
Right.
We need to be vigilant but not paranoid.
Okay.
We need to educate ourselves
Yeah.
to understand the warning signs to support those who are vulnerable.
That's a good point. And we need to remember the victims.
Absolutely.
Not just as names in a case file,
Right.
but as human beings whose lives were tragically cut short.
We need to honor their memory.
Their stories deserve to be told, their memories honored.
Yes, we owe it to them to never stop seeking the truth.
To never let their cases fade into obscurity.
This has been a heavy conversation,
Yeah,
a difficult one,
it has.
but I think it's been important.
It has.
It's forced us to confront some uncomfortable truths about ourselves,
Right.
about the world we live in.
And hopefully it sparks some questions in our listeners' mind.
Yeah.
Questions about the nature of good and evil,
Yeah.
about the choices we make and the responsibility we have to look out for one another.
Exactly. So to our listeners out there,
Yeah.
we leave you with this.
Okay.
Stay curious, keep questioning, and never be afraid to look into the shadows.
That's right.
But do so with compassion, with understanding, and with a commitment to making the world a little bit brighter, a little bit safer.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
It's been a journey, hasn't it?
It really has.
Yeah.
And while the mystery of the family might remain unsolved,
Right.
I think we've gained some valuable insights along the way.
I think so.
Until next time,
Yeah.
stay curious, stay informed,
Stay safe?
and stay safe. Yeah, it's a good point. All right, so let's dive into that.
Okay.
We've talked about, these horrific crimes
Right.
and the mystery surrounding the family.
Yeah.
But I think there's another layer to this that's worth exploring.
Okay.
Which is, why are we so captivated by true crime in general?
Right.
I mean, these unsolved mysteries, especially ones as dark and disturbing as the family murders?
It's a question that has intrigued psychologists and criminologists for a long time.
Yeah.
I think there are a few things going on.
Okay.
First, there's a natural human curiosity about the dark side of human nature.
Okay, so we're all a little bit morbid.
Yeah, I think it's safe to say that
Yeah.
we're fascinated by what makes people do terrible things.
Right, we want to understand the motivations, the psychology.
Exactly. We want to know what makes someone cross that line.
That line that most of us would never even think about crossing.
Right. And true crime stories, especially the unsolved ones,
Yeah.
they offer us a glimpse into that world.
Okay, that makes sense. And I think there's also an element of problem solving
Oh,
involved.
absolutely.
Like we're all amateur detectives
Right.
trying to piece together the clues.
We want to solve the puzzle.
Yeah,
We want to find the killer.
that's like a mental exercise.
Exactly.
And with the family murders,
Yeah.
there are so many twists and turns
So many unanswered questions.
and dead ends.
It's a real challenge.
Yeah, but I think it's also about feeling safe.
Okay.
By consuming these stories,
Right.
we're sort of confronting our fears
Yeah.
in a controlled environment.
We can experience the horror
Yeah.
without actually being in danger.
We're learning about the monsters
Right.
so we can avoid them in real life.
It's like a vaccination against fear.
Yeah, I like that analogy.
It's a way of processing our anxieties.
Okay, so there's this morbid curiosity,
Right.
the puzzle-solving aspect,
The mental challenge.
and the sense of safety.
And the feeling of control.
Well, what about the victims?
Yeah, that's an important point.
We can't forget about them
We
in
can't.
all of this.
It's easy to get caught up in the mystery.
Yeah.
To forget that real people lost their lives.
These were sons,
Right, brothers, friends.
people with hopes and dreams.
And their families are still living with the pain of their loss.
Absolutely. It's crucial to remember that
Yes.
as we explore these cases.
Right, we need to approach them with sensitivity and respect.
So let's talk about some of the theories surrounding the family itself.
Okay.
I mean, what kind of group were they?
Right.
Were they a cult?
Yeah, were they a satanic group?
A group of sadists?
Were they just a bunch of guys who got together and did terrible things?
These are the questions that have been swirling around this case for decades.
And unfortunately, there are no easy answers.
No, there really aren't. I mean, some people believe that the family was a highly organized group
Right.
with a specific agenda.
Maybe they were involved in some kind of ritualistic killing.
Or maybe they were targeting specific types of victims.
Yeah, perhaps they had a hit list?
But there's no evidence to support that.
No, not really.
It's more likely that they were a more loosely organized group
Right.
of individuals who shared a common interest in violence and sadism.
It's possible that they were drawn to von Einem,
Yeah.
who seemed to have a charismatic personality.
Right, he was the ringleader.
Yeah, he might have been the one who brought them together.
And he might have been the one who encouraged them to act out their darkest fantasies.
It's a disturbing thought,
It is.
but it's one that we can't ignore.
So if that's the case,
Yeah.
why haven't more people come forward?
Right. Why hasn't anyone broken their silence?
Fear.
Fear is a powerful motivator.
Yeah, these people were
They
terrified.
might have been threatened,
Yeah.
blackmailed.
Or they might have just been afraid of the consequences of speaking out.
And remember, these were powerful men
Yeah.
with connections.
It could make life very different.
of anyone who crossed them.
So the silence persists.
It does.
The mystery endures.
Yeah, and the victims' families are left to grieve
Yeah.
without answers.
And we're left to grapple with the uncomfortable truth
Right.
that sometimes evil wins.
It's a sobering thought.
It is, but it's a reality that we have to face.
It is.
So what do we do with this knowledge?
Well, I think it's important to learn from these tragedies.
Okay.
To be aware of the warning signs.
Yeah.
To support those who are vulnerable.
Right.
And to speak out against injustice.
Even if it's scary,
Even if it's scary.
we can't let fear silence us.
We can't.
We have to be the voice for those who no longer have a voice.
That's a powerful message.
And it's one that I hope our listeners take to heart.
I hope so, too.
This has been a really intense deep dive,
It has.
but I think it's been an important one.
I agree.
We've explored the dark side of human nature,
Yeah.
the complexities of evil,
The importance of justice.
and the enduring power of mystery.
and the resilience of the human spirit.
Exactly. So to our listeners out there,
Yeah.
thank you for joining us on this journey.
It's been a privilege.
We'll see you next time for another deep dive into the unknown.
Stay curious.
Stay curious and stay safe.